But thank you all, first of all, for being here, and Joel and Ellie and Brent and everyone else for all your work in putting together a fabulous day. I can think of no one better to put a cap on our day than Jon Kay, and I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Jon Kay, our featured speaker this afternoon. We are proud to say that Dr. Kay received his master's degree in folk studies from here at WKU. He went on to do admirable public sector folklore work a number of years in Florida before returning to Indiana, where he has been the director of Traditional Arts Indiana since 2004. He was four. He received his PhD from Indiana University, and in addition to being the director of TAI, he is also an associate professor in the Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology. Jon works at the intersection of folklore, the arts, and gerontology, and his research and applied folklore work highlights how the creative practices of older adults contribute to their quality of life. He is the author of Folk Art and Aging, Life Story Objects and Their Makers, and the edited volume, The Expressive Lives of Elders, Folklore Art and Aging. And he is the lead author of Memory, Art, and Aging, a resource and activity guide as well. He's also produced more than 60 exhibitions and 30 documentary films on a range of arts-related topics. In 2020, he was awarded an IU Bicentennial Medal for his service to the state and to the university. So we're thrilled to have Jon Kay with us tonight. He will begin his presentation in just a moment. Please note that at the bottom of your screen, there should be a Q&A place, little thing that says Q&A, little bubble. So you're welcome to put questions there at any time. And following Jon's talk, we hope to have some time for some questions and answers. So thank you, Jon, for being here with us. And everyone, please help us to welcome Dr. Jon Kay.
Thank you very much, Anne. I really appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just kind of dive into this. Share sound. So can everybody see my screen if I do this? Can you all see that okay?
See that, Jon.
Great. Again, I'm really excited to be here and to be a part of this gathering. I've just been really inspired by hearing everybody's stories and the presentations that they've done, and just such an inspiring legacy and future that Kentucky has for just an amazing infrastructure for the folk and traditional arts. And I think that this gathering is only stands on the shoulders of so much good public work that's been done in the state, and you can just see where it's going, such great direction. So I just commend you all for the work that you're doing. This is one of a few talks I'm going to be giving in connection with Western Kentucky University. And so I was trying to figure out how I'm going to differentiate those talks so I'm not doing the same ones over and over again. And this one should be totally different from the others. Having said that, I do want to do a little bit of a shout out to all of the folks that I worked with at Western Kentucky University. But I also want to thank Bob Gates. He was mentioning this morning my work over in Bell County. That was really my first contract job as a public folklorist. The idea of going into a community and doing public folklore. I remember calling my wife the first night I was over there in Bell County and saying, "Oh, what am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing." And I learned my way. And part of the way I learned my way was through the instruction I received from Bob Gates, and I thank him for that. But also through the kind of generative attention that people, the old timers in Bell County, gave to me. They opened up their home and their stories, and they made me feel like that I could do this work, and they helped me. People like my friend Damon Helton, Willow furniture maker over there, that became like a second grandfather to me, and I stayed in touch with for many years until he passed away. And then after that time in Bell County, I really learned even more from Bob Gates and the rest of the Folklife program and the WKU professors when I was there at the very first Kentucky Folklife Festival. And we had planned all of this great work for these school kids that were going to come in, and we were thinking all about that. And I think the thing that we didn't recognize at the very beginning was the impact that was going to have on the lives of many of the people that we were presenting there. They really became like a family working together there. And I became good friends with many of them. I stayed in contact with them for many years. And I really value that time. And that's where I really learned to do public folklore work. If Bell County trained me to be a field worker and a field researcher, it was really at the Kentucky Folklife Festival, from everything from building the marble yard to writing signage to hosting narrative stages. That's where I learned to do the work that's really allowed me to continue as a public folklorist. So I want to thank the Kentucky Folklife program, thank Western Kentucky University, and I specifically want to thank Bob Gates for giving me so many opportunities and helping me out so much. So my little love fest on Bowling Green and Kentucky, and on Bob Gates here. Well, moving into our topic, this idea of older adults. I have to be honest with you. I really feel guilty by the fact that for all of these years, I've worked with older adults, and I rarely gave it much attention to the fact that they were older adults. My research almost always took me to those keepers of those old traditions, people like Junie Theo Harris here up in Elwood, Indiana, that I did work with. She was a handmade chocolates. She learned from her aunt how to do it, and she was in her late 70s when I interviewed her. And she still operated the chocolate shop, her little chocolate shop there. And she kept telling me that she was the last of her line to do this. And so I kept thinking about heritage, and I kept thinking about tradition, but I didn't really think about why was she in her 70s and still throwing chocolate? Why wasn't she retired? Why was she still so excited to meet with me, a field worker, and tell her story to them? And I started thinking about what people got from us doing our work and what they received from their creative practice. And so I still was interested in heritage. I was still interested in notions of tradition. I was still interested in identity and communities. But I started thinking maybe there's more to this work than just the heritage side of things, just the cultural side of things, actually the humanity side of things that we're looking at. And I saw this over and over, not just with crafts or with folklife types of things like hand-thrown candy, but people like Archie Kraut, who played music, learned to play on a cigar box fiddle his dad made for him when he was a little kid, played old-time square dances and stuff when he was young. Then after World War II, when he got married and have a family, he stopped playing. But then when he retired from being a phone worker, a lineman, he took up fiddling again and played all those old tunes that he remembered from his childhood. Why was it that there were things that people learned when they were young that when they became older, they took on new meaning and new purpose in their life, and people rededicated themselves to it? So no longer was he what his job was, but he actually was what he wanted to be. And he started playing at community gatherings, at nursing homes, and senior centers, and at festivals as well. At every place I looked around, there was this older adults keeping traditions within their communities and groups. When I went to talk with Manjit Singh, he was a wonderful tabla player, and singer, and we were asking them about his work, and he says that the music gave him joy. I get joy from playing music, and I should share that. And so there's this idea of giving traditional arts, passing that on to the next generation. We know that as tradition, but there's more going on there. There's also the flip side of that, not just the sharing, but the joy that those older artists get when they do that, not just from playing, but from sharing. And so what I thought I would do is I would focus a little bit on some of the problems that older adults experience in later life and relate them directly to some of the concepts that we as folklorists and community scholars and culture workers, the work that we see. And then at the end of my talk, what I hope I can do is to tell you a little bit about some of the programs that we've been doing, and hopefully you'll see how they tie into these things. Well, there's this thing called the 3 plagues of aging. Dr. Bill Thomas writes about those. And these are kind of this universal problem. It's one of those things that is happening, especially here in the United States, as the social bonds have been loosed. There have been these collective problems that have emerged. Elders suffer from feelings of isolation or loneliness, feelings of boredomness. I just don't know what to do with myself. Feelings of helplessness. I just can't do what I used to be able to do. I can't take care of things like I used to. This is my friend Roy Spite. He was a drum maker. And even when he was in his last few weeks of his life, he had a form of dementia. His wife told me he drug himself out to his driveway and got his chisels and mallets out. And even when he didn't know how to do lots of other things, the muscle memory of being able to do that craft brought him joy and gave him purpose. Up to the very end, he was still going to drumming circles and being part of that. Even when everything else was such a chore for him, that gave his life purpose and gave it meaning. And so there are all these things that the traditional arts, the vernacular arts, everyday cultural expressions that they give older adults when they practice them. This was my friend John Schoolman. He lived to be 100 years old. And he told me, it keeps my mind busy. It keeps me going. It gives his life purpose. So tying it in with this idea of the arts being something that can help us stave off or support our lives so that we don't end up being challenged by those plagues of aging. I kept thinking about most of the artists I worked with as a folklorist. They didn't suffer with isolation. They didn't suffer with loneliness. They didn't suffer with feelings of helplessness. They were usually the most able people I knew, even though many of them were quite old. They weren't bored. They were always staying busy. They always had something to do. And so I want to look at each one of these in a little bit of detail. This is my friend Bob Taylor. I write about him in my book, Folk Art and Aging, and I was paying attention very much to these wood carvings, these narrative landscapes that he used to tell stories. But one of the things very much about the work that he made was they improved sociability. They worked on connecting him with other people, like the Circle City woodcarvers or going to wood carving shows and clubs. It gave him a purpose. It gave him a reason to gather with other people. Now, folklorists know all about sociability. We talk about community all the time. We talk about folk groups. We talk about networks, and we can see that play out. Well, this is one of those things that really becomes so important in everyday life. Being socially connected is a better predictor. You're more likely to live, science has told us, if you have better social networks than if you don't. In fact, social connection is a better predictor of mortality than smoking, poor diet, obesity, all of those things. Having that social network is an important part of that. So when my friends, the Sisters of the Cloth, get together to quilt, well, actually, they don't get together to quilt. They get together to eat and do what they call bitch and stitch sessions. But they enjoy their time together, and quilt making becomes a way for them to do that, a way for them to experience that sense of community and to give themselves purpose and to have those supports. And I've seen this in all types of expressive practices and traditional arts. This is my friend Kathy Rucker. Kathy is a clogger, a dance instructor, and she has suffered cancer, all types of problems that she's had in her life, and she's still dancing. And I wanted to share a little bit of what she has to say about how those social networks and how they're important and how dancing is a part of it. She has a group that she calls the Still Kickins, and they're a clogging group in Indianapolis. Let's listen to her.
Well, I started the Still Kickins because a lot of the Circle City people were getting older and they wanted to, we had some younger people in the Circle City, and so they kind of felt like it was just getting too hard and they needed a different kind of class. And so I understood that. I was getting older. And so I created the Still Kickin' Cloggers. And they're all 55 years of age and older. And some people don't start till they're 60 or 70 or whatever. Most of them start dancing after they've retired. You don't have kids, you don't have to worry about going to work the next morning and you can't get out of bed because you vlogged all evening. So, and so many people are widowed, and so many people's family, they don't have family anymore, and so it's a place to go where you meet new friends, and you can always find somebody to go out and eat with, somebody that will come over and practice dancing. So basically that's how they got started. It's just the Circle City people got older and wanted to move out of that group, and some of them still dance. I mean, we still have Still Kickins that dance with Circle City. It just depends on what you want to do. But that's basically how it all started.
So that shows us just a little bit of that. The idea that she's able to, that this dancing has really created a whole community. And for many people, it was something that they didn't even come to until they were approaching retirement age. And it gave them a social network and a community to be part of. And I've seen this over and over in lots of different communities and lots of different groups, that they use an expressive practice. They use a dance or music jams or something like that to forge a family of their own among peers, among age mates, and people of affinity in this. This is the Heritage Place Ladies of the Dance, and they do dancing up in Indianapolis, and they dance with all types of things, and they do line dancing, but they choreograph and they work with Nancy or Kathy as well to do this. I wanted to share just a little bit of their observation and introduce you to a few of them. So let me play this.
I love dancing. I do ballroom. I also do Chicago 8-count step dance. So I just love to dance, just the moves.
When I retired, she's the one brought me out here just to start dancing. And I love the ladies because, as you retire, you want to get involved in something. And this is kind of a community. I feel like they're my sisters for me.
My name is Joycelyn Davis, and I was recently diagnosed with cancer. My doctor told me to find something that I could do to get up out of that bed and not feel sorry for myself. So the thing I thought was dance.
I'm new. I love it. It's just a really fresh time. I thought older people would get slower. These ladies are wonderful.
every single one of them.
So you can see all of a sudden it takes that whole notion of folk group or community, and it really shows even more importance to it. This idea of sociability that gerontologists talk about is a very real thing, and is very important for us being able to keep our older adults healthy and well. And I think folklorists have a lot that we can share with people about the importance of folk groups and social networks. The second concept that I want us to talk about is this notion of tradition. Anybody that's a community scholar or folklorist, we've studied about tradition, the idea of things passing on to the next generation, this continuation of creative practices or practices in general. But gerontologists talk about generativity. Generativity is this notion of the care and guiding of future generations. And it's something that is a psychological need that we all, or most of us, end up having. Usually it starts when we get into our 30s and 40s. But by the time we get into our late 50s and 60s, generativity is full blown, and that there's a strong desire to try to guide and to share what we know with the next generation. And you can imagine all the reason that evolutionarily that this has evolved for us to feel like we need to have. And I unfortunately know so many people who have something that they want to pass on, and they just can't find that next person to share it with. This is my friend Alan Richards. Alan grew up making split rail fences in Brown County near where I live. This is his grandson Porter. And Porter's turned into quite a split rail fence maker of his own. And I wanted to share a little piece of video that I shot first time I met Porter, and he was splitting out a fence. What I want you to do as you watch this little video clip is to look at the facial expressions of both the grandfather and the grandson.
I believe it's one more licking that'll do it. Hey, look at that. All right. Probably are.
So the grandfather was proud, and the grandson was happy with his accomplishment. Well, we would look at that and we go, "Oh, isn't that great that there's tradition happening there?" Well, that's also generativity. And many of us have seen apprenticeship programs or participated in apprenticeship programs or facilitate apprenticeship programs. We've seen this over and over. We get this idea that we're passing on, we're creating a situation where older adults or master artists are training that next generation of people. But anybody who's been around it very much at all, we quickly realize that flows back and forth, that there's a reciprocity that's happening there, and that in many ways, apprenticeship programs are just as much about the master artists and the way that they feel and experience that as it is for the apprentice. I saw that with my friend Amelia Kofer and Andrea Faust. I've seen it with my friend Larry Haycraft and his son Samuel. In fact, it wasn't until we had done several programs with Larry. He hadn't taught his traditional art to anyone, but through doing public programs, his son Samuel started learning the craft alongside him at Traditional Arts Indiana events. And so generativity is an important aspect of a lot of what it is we do. But as I said, there are so many older adults that have traditional practices, like my friend James Jon, that very much want to see it pass on to the next generation. He was telling me about trying to teach his grandson to do paper folding, but his grandson was really just too young to do Chinese paper folding, and he was really disappointed in that. And so actually just a few months before James passed away, I brought him into my to my class at Indiana University. We were meeting in the museum there on campus, and James taught my whole class to fold these paper pagodas like he had learned when he was young. And it was really great for my students to learn about tradition through this process. It was great for James to feel that generativity. And you know that a project has been successful when you see things like this happening. You know, everyone's got to Snapchat their experiences. So this idea of generativity and sociability are important things that as we create public programs that we want to fold those in, or at least keep them in our mind as we do it. As these older adults are doing a lot of their traditional arts, we focus on the idea of mastery. When we have to apply for grants and that type of thing, we want to talk about the mastery of a traditional artist. But many times while we may be looking at mastery, the artists who are doing it, they're thinking about mindfulness, that actually immersing themselves and getting into a state of flow is actually a whole part of what it is that they do. When my friend Dee Neerman, she's as bona fide of a traditional artist as a public folklorist we go looking for. She's a fourth generation rag rug maker, works on the same loom that her great grandmother worked on. But when I talk to her about that, she loves to talk about the history and the heritage of it. But it's easily just as much about the process for her and about immersing herself in this. And listen to her talk about
I enjoy
this.
it. It's fun to see the colors come together, just to strip some material and it comes into something usable. And it's just part of me. I'm not a TV watcher. I just have a lot of thoughts of my own, especially my memories from back, even when we were childhood, you know, our childhood memories. And I just enjoy it. It's relaxing to me, even after a hard day's work out hoeing in the garden or something.
So you can see that it becomes something that she can sit at, lose herself in the flow of making these rugs, feels purpose and meaning in this, also communing with her traditions and her history through that process. But it becomes a way of getting into that state of flow that so many times we talk about. And I've had this with many of the artists that I've talked with. Rose Muller, Jan Betcher, she talked about the same thing, about sitting down to do a plate and just completely losing herself in that process. When we see anything that it requires a mastered skill, we know that people are getting into the zone, as they sometimes talk about, or getting into flow. And this is incredibly important for older adults to experience this element where time melts away and you find yourself in complete and total focus. That doesn't just have to do with crafts. It could be dance, it could be music, it could be storytelling, it could be volunteer work, anything that gets you into that zone. I saw this, my friend, I first learned about this with my friend Keith Rubel. He's a bowl hewer. And Keith always starts to kind of not really complain, but he worries about kids, you know, the idea that they don't learn a skill perhaps that becomes this lifetime art, this thing that they can devote themselves. He worries that in school we put too much importance on things like sports, and he really thinks they should learn to play music or do crafts or do something that they can practice throughout their life cycle, throughout their lives. And seeing him do that has been really important. But this hewing of these wooden bowls is something that he's really perfected. He learned when he was younger how to do this. And now he's been in our apprenticeship program and teaching it to the next generation. And he really feels accomplishments, both from a generativity point of view, but also he feels like it's important for him to share that kind of meditative practice of making art with other people. So why is any of this important? And this is moving into the next part, the kind of so what of my lecture here tonight. It's because of resilience. When we talk about resilience, I think sometimes we have the wrong idea. We often think about resilience as being kind of grit that somebody has. This is my friend Jenny Kander. I couldn't think of her name off the top of my head. And she devoted herself to making these dolls. And when she became sick, it became something that she even doubled down on. She did more of it, and it gave her a sense of purpose. But when we think about grit, or we think about resilience, it's more than just grit. That's a very singular look. Either someone has it or they don't when we talk about grit. Reality, resilience is like a constellation. It's a whole series of supports that you have in your life that that support you. It could be everything from good genetics can make you resilient. Good family can help you with your resilience. Good health insurance and money, those can help you with resilience. But over and over again, as my work as a folklorist, I've seen where traditional arts become a form of resilience. And that requires certain amounts of adaptability, but also having this sense of purpose in your craft. This is my friend Ruth Newhouser. She used to garden all around her house, but as she got older, it became more difficult for her to get out down on her knees and do this. And she remembered a craft that she enjoyed doing, the tatting of lace. And so she adapted her making of lace to make her own flower arrangements like she used to do. I saw the same type of thing when I worked in Florida with Nancy Morgan. She had quilted at the park where I worked for probably close to 40 years, something like that. Every week she would come in and meet with the other women and quilt. Well, she had gotten to the point where her bursitis was so bad that she couldn't lean over the quilting frame anymore. And she said, John, I'm going to have to quit. I'm going to have to quit quilting at the park. I can't come in. I said, well, you could just come in and talk to people. And she goes, no, that wouldn't be right. And I talked to her, and she recalled for me and told me about briar stitching that she used to do when she was young. And we figured out that while she couldn't lean over a quilting frame and she couldn't do the tiny little stitches that she once did, the kind of big folky stitches that she liked to do opened up whole new possibilities for her. So for her to be able to do her work, she had to have some adaptability and some change. That art making became a point of resilience for her. One more case, maybe a little more stark of a case. My friend Mary Alice Collins. Mary Alice was one of our state fair masters up here in Indiana. And she always baked dozens and dozens of pies for the Indiana State Fair. Well, about 5 or 6 years ago, she was traveling. She was actually down in South America. She loved to travel. And she got sick, got sepsis, lost all the fingers on both hands, lost her legs below the knees. And it was really devastating when I heard about it. And I talked with the people at the state fair. And then I found out that she had come down with cancer too. And oh no, that shit's going to be over for her. I can't believe this. Well, come the state fair, lo and behold, with the help of her husband, she made 30 pies that she entered that first year. And I was just shocked. Why was it somebody that, had suffered all of this just a few months before, was diagnosed with cancer? Why in the world would she make a pie, one pie, let alone make 30 pies? This is because she was speaking to herself. This gave her purpose. It gave her meaning. She enjoyed the process, and she was telling people that she was resilient. She was telling herself that she could still do these things. And the next year, she made more pies. And for several years, she made pies until last year when she finally passed away. And so traditional arts, folk life, becomes a way for us to tell ourselves who we are and express ourselves, not just to others, but to ourselves. And it provides a type of resilience for us in everyday life. Well, we've been doing all types of public programs through Traditional Arts Indiana, trying to build on these notions of sociability and generativity and resilience. And I thought I'd close out my session real quickly here to tell you about some of those public programs that we've been initiating. we did a Folklife survey of Southern Indiana, looking at the traditional cultural expressions of various people. And we found lots of traditional arts, whether wood carving or painting or drawing or map making, all different types of things that people did that were about recording their memories, whether it was writing it as words or whether it was painting it or drawing it, because they wanted to leave a tangible record of something of their lives. And so we hosted some memory painting workshops. We did a couple of those, and they became really popular. And people brought in photographs, and they did reminiscence conversations, and then they proceeded to paint meaningful scenes for them. And so this became one of our early programs. We also knew that music was really important in Southern Indiana, and so we worked with my friend Kara Barnard. Kara started, she was complaining to me about the fact that she didn't have enough students, young people, to learn to take music lessons from her, and she was worrying about how she was going to be able to grow that part of it. And I said, well, why don't you, instead of thinking about teaching kids, why don't you think about teaching some older adults? I know that there are a lot of older adults that would really benefit from having some type of creative practice that they haven't initiated from when they were younger. And so she talked about guitar and banjo, and she finally settled on doing these dulcimers. And I thought I would share a little bit of this little video clip about that work that she's doing.
I've always loved music my whole life, never had the time to pursue it. And I just want to say that it has already majorly improved the quality of my life. So thank you. Thank you.
My name is Marta Anderson, and my husband Rick and I came to the dulcimer class. It gave us something to do together. We just recently retired, and it's just really it's something we want to continue. So it's really been great.
I came here with a friend because we thought it would be fun, but I think I found my instrument from my lifetime. I love it, and it was easy. Kara was a great teacher, and I am going to continue it. We're going to meet as a group and maybe do some gigs, so I'm excited. It's a new part of life.
I know our first class, we started looking at the music, everything, just sort of a little light went off in my head, like, yeah. So it's great to get out of the house and use a different part of my brain, and never played a stringed instrument before, and it's simple enough to be simple, but I think it's advanced enough to, there's a place to keep going, and it's nice to meet with a bunch of people. I didn't know anybody in this class.
I love playing the dulcimer. It's relaxing. The lessons here have just been phenomenal. Kara is awesome, and it gives you a purpose as you get older, and just really enjoy it. Recommend it for anyone.
So we've been doing these programs. Some of them are artist-led, like the memory painting or the dulcimer classes, where we try to find something that will just engage community people. I'll be honest with you, I didn't get hung up on notions of what is a traditional art or what is not. I was just looking for things that were recognized within the community that people would be interested in as a way of doing that. Having said that, we did do some programs that were very much centered around folk life. And I want to tell you a little bit about those. We did these arts and aging summits where we did these folk life surveys. We interviewed all of these people about their traditional arts and their crafts. And then we invited them in because we had heard from them that some of the problem was that they didn't know where to share. They didn't know other people that might like this. And so we did these summits where we just kind of went around the room. People, remember when you're in elementary school, you do show and tells? Well, we did show and tell with the arts. And the whole time that we're going around the room and people are telling a story or singing a song or showing some of their crafts, I'm asking them questions about social engagement. I'm asking them questions about tradition and generativity. I'm asking them questions about meaningfulness and flow. And all of a sudden, people are recognizing that they're doing more than just making stuff or doing more than just playing music. They're actually giving their life purpose and meaning through these arts. And people have just really, really enjoyed these things. And so as the microphone goes around, each person shares their stories with us. At the first workshop that we did, we invited an arts professional and a music professional, and we did some like quote training of people. But the thing that we heard over and over and over again from people was those things were nice, but what they really wanted was to hear the stories. They really wanted to connect with each other around their crafts and around their music and around their arts. And so the next time we did the program, we had quilters that brought in quilts to talk about that. And we did the same type of thing with these follow-up things and asking them about what support systems that crafts might bring to them or music might bring to them in their work. And over, we just kept hearing positive stories from them about the meaning of the arts in everyday life. One of the artists I worked with was my friend Hillary Begley. Hillary's plays harmonica, and he is really probably one of the last people to play this like traditional dance music on harmonica. And I was asking him about it, and he said, "Oh, I think it keeps me healthy." He only has partial lung capacity, and his doctors told him to keep playing harmonica. And then he said, it's also good for your mind because you have to think about every little note that you play and keep playing it. And he really was a great spokesperson for the continuation of using these traditional arts as kind of a culturally approved way of staying well and keeping up your well-being as an older adult. From all of that work, we ended up making this 80-page resource and activity guide. And I'll make sure I get there's a link there. There's a QR code if you want to grab those. You can do that, or maybe someone can copy that and put it into the chat for us. But we made these guides. They're freely available. We'll mail out print copies as well as we've got digital copies that people can have. And inside this guide, it tells the stories of the artists that we've met and that we've worked with, and we created these activities, these things that people can do that makes use of these kind of culturally approved or culturally grounded activities. And so it becomes a really powerful tool for senior centers, community centers, but also individual artists. And we've been doing also lots of programs around older adults, where the summits are very much about peer-to-peer. One of the things I noticed was the grad students that I brought and the undergrads that I brought to help out with the workshops, the ones that were doing the name tags and were helping people set up their displays of their work and helping them find seats and the like. The older adults zeroed in on them and really wanted to hear about their lives and their stories. And so I decided I wanted to do more programs that were really about putting young people in conversation with older people. And I did this project called the Memory Shelves Project. And a local senior assisted living apartment complex, outside the doorways to an elder's home are these little shelves. And on those shelves, they'll put seasonal decorations, or they'll put family mementos, pictures of grandkids, but many, many times you can tell what their occupations were or tell a little bit about their life stories. And so I invited my students to go, and they interviewed the older adults. They documented their shelves. They did oral history with these older adults. And then they made these posters, and we went back and they put these posters up and left them up on exhibit in the community room at the senior apartment complex. And then one by one, the students presented their poster and talked about the older adult that they had documented their life story and their shelf about. And it became really powerful for these older adults, not just to share their stories, but to actually hear someone younger than them tell their story back to them. And that's the true meaning of generativity when we talk about that. And as I said, we've done lots of these types of programs. The one last program I want to talk about, because I'm totally out of time, but we're just found out we received NEA funding to do our elder music recording project. based upon the success of the Memory, Art, and Aging Guide and the field work that we've done. We did a pilot with Stephen and Nancy Dickey. Stephen's a local fiddling legend. His father was the famous Lotus Dickey. And we recorded he and his wife, Nancy, playing these old songs, as well as some original tunes, old fiddle tunes and original fiddle tunes. And it was great. But then we went into the community and we did a big celebration, and we pressed 1,000 of these CDs, and we gave away hundreds and hundreds of them in the community. And then we shipped them out to area libraries and to other folks, so that we got them out to people that could use them. And we saw the real power of making this important archival piece, but also sharing it with the community. And we're going to be making listening guides that will go along with them so they can be used in senior centers. And we're just starting this project. I just, in fact, this morning got this email of this is a prototype for the CD cover for the next one. We're going to do a recording. We've just finished recording with Reverend Dennis Freeman, who does amazing gospel piano work. So that's some of the programs that we've done, some of the folk life and connections with gerontology that I wanted to foreground. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I think we've got at least another 25 minutes or so. So please feel free to let me know. So I want to stop sharing my screen. And I'd love to hear from folks. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Jon. The questions are starting to come in. So as a reminder, please put your any questions that you have in the Q&A. They are starting to come in, as I said, and I certainly have some as well. I just want to say really quick, as people have time to put some questions in, what I love, one of the things, Jon, I love about your work is I feel like for folklorists, it's long been sort of a common sense idea that as people age, they go back to folk arts from childhood, or they explore family tradition in these new ways. And your work takes what we've just sort of said, and I've said that in class, right, for years, but your work takes that and really explores it in important ways, and of course your applied work that is so important, as you've demonstrated. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
One of the questions we've got so far, Beth McCarty says, this is a wonderful presentation. Have you ever worked with occupational therapists with your work?
I have worked with a few. I did a program over in St. Louis. One of the things after my book came out, I worked with an occupational therapist over there to do some workshop types of things, but I haven't worked one-on-one with an occupational therapist, so I'd welcome the opportunity to do that. So Beth, if you're an occupational therapist, reach out to me. I'd love to hear about your work.
And I had a related question, Jon, in terms of those in other fields like gerontology and so forth. What kind of response? I know you've worked closely with others. What kind of response do you get as you bring the folk life piece and folk art piece into it, which I'm sure is new for a lot of folks?
Right. It's been really positive. The folks that I've connected with, it kind of so much of the work that's happening in the area of creative aging, there's been a lot of work done in arts and aging, and it ends up being about bringing the teaching artist into the community. But as people like Alan Jabbour and Simon Bronner have written, it's not arts in general that you can just apply on something. It's this idea of there being something that is community centered, and that's the part that I think often the gerontologists get most excited about, is the idea that it's actually something that's going to be sustainable, because there's already these support structures. There are already people getting together to jam. There are already people getting together to dance, or to play, to make quilts, or play roly hole marbles, or whatever the case may be that we're talking about. So I think that's the thing that I would point out that they're most excited about, because a lot of this, I think, just as we instinctually know it, they kind of instinctually know it, but it's good for them to hear people say this. So
And we have a related question about advice for making connections within communities of older adults and or organizations that serve them. How did you make those connections yourself, and what advice do you have for others who may want to explore that?
Right. I've done just a little bit of work with people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And I'll be the first to say that's not the area that I've gone into that much, because my goal is to try to work with people before dementia sets in, before, to give them these activities that promote wellness. But there has been some wonderful work done with music and memory. There's a great documentary called Alive Inside, and I highly recommend that. I think there's also we've done some of that work here in Bloomington, but I think also the idea of being able to give people or recognize that people have these things that they can keep doing, even though maybe they don't even know why they're doing it or know how to do other things, but there are things that become instinctual for them. They get this muscle memory, so they can't maybe remember the name of their own children, but they can still carve a wooden drum because they've just done that repeatedly every day. So those are the types of things that I've done.
And on that same topic, Delaney Bowers had asked, you mentioned it briefly, and you've mentioned it again now briefly, but you may have more to say on the challenges of documenting tradition bearers with dementia and Alzheimer's.
I think that the approach that I have is a little bit liberating, because so many times when we as folklorists go out and do this work, it's like, oh, we want to catch it before it's gone. Oh, they're going to be the last one. And in reality, what we should be saying is, well, it's great to document what they do, and that has value. Supporting them and being able to continue doing this is really what the power of this creative practice is, and the fact that so many people, oh, he's not as good, he can't play fiddle anymore, or he can't play. I had this with one of the artists I work with. Oh, he's lost his eyesight, he can't do this, or people come up with all these excuses to take these things away from people or to devalue their practice of doing it. And reality is, I don't care what it sounds like. I don't care how good it is or how ugly it is or how whatever it is. If it helps them get into that state of flow and helps them fill the time and feel like they're contributing something and have purpose and meaning, that's the value of art. It's not the value of what it is hanging on the wall or whatever. So that's my take on it, at least.
That's beautiful. Grace Waltz asks, I'm curious to know about your students' reactions and takeaways from the Memory Shelves project. How did they come to appreciate that project?
I have to say that that's one of the truly interesting things that has happened just in the past few years. So many of my students, when they take the class, they're scared to death. And I remember being scared about doing field work and that type of thing. But these are people who are afraid of old people, because it's like, I've never had any old people in my life. I've never been around older adults in any way. And many of these kids have never had grandparents that grew up near them. And by doing this project, the reaction from the older adults and the reaction from the students is just truly powerful. And so many of the students end up going back and volunteering at the senior apartment and stay in contact with the older adults that they become a part of. And I think that this is one of the consequences of modernity, the fact that these social bonds, we move to have jobs, and grandparents no longer have the work that they of the grandchildren that they once would have been their duty to do.
We have a couple of comments that I'll read. Bob Gates Says, great job, Jon. My daughter is working in the field of memory care in graduate school, and she's been introducing Folklife to her professors. I think your book would help them understand the field and its relationship to aging. Absolutely. And we will make sure, I'm sure, Bob, you probably know how to get a hold of Jon's book, but we'll make sure that all the participants know how to get a hold of Jon's books to share
Right.
that.
And I would say, I mean, definitely, I'd love to have them read the Folk Art and Aging book and the Expressive Lives of Elders, the two books that I've written. But the Memory, Art, and Aging Guide is very much something that's free, that can be easily implemented into memory care units or worked into senior apartments or something like that. And it's totally free. In fact, if they go to our website and fill out the form, we'll send a printed copy to them. So I'm excited to share that work.
And I think Maddie Gates is even here in the audience, which
Hey, Maddie, I remember you when you're itty bitty.
Yes,
Didn't mean to
many of
embarrass
us
you.
watched Maddie grow up. Another comment, Lisa Higgins says, Jon Kay articulates everything I think about working with elders with such empathy and grace and wisdom. Absolutely.
You're too sweet, Lisa.
We have another question. Let's see, it seems that that this work offers a window into the joy of many people's lives. And Jon, you used that word joy, which I appreciated. And this question asks, this is a great question, but I imagine it could also evoke nostalgia and sadness. Could you talk a bit about how you navigate the emotional toll that this work has on yourself and those you work with? And I think any of us who've done field work with older adults have experienced that in field work. And so with your work specifically focused on older adults, I'm sure you have a lot to share about that.
Right. It's a part of it. In general, I've been very lucky that so many times we get asked to talk to a lot. Folklorists often get asked to talk to the people who are more successful at aging than others. There is they've found their practice often, but then I go and I talk to these people, and I remember I was giving a talk one time, and someone just said, I'm 65. I've just retired, and I have I don't have any talent. I don't have any creative competencies at all in my life. I've just worked all these years. What am I to do? They found my work to be very depressing because there wasn't that hope for them. It was a regret that they were seeing it. And I said to them, I said, if you were getting ready to retire and you looked at your finances and you said, oh, I haven't saved any money for retirement yet, it's going to be fairly bleak when you retire about your finances. And I think it's the same way with creative practice. The best thing you could do would have been started investing in your creative practice years and years before. But any financial planner will tell you when you get a few years before retirement, what's the second best day? Today. To start doing those creative practices, to find something that you can become passionate about. Almost all of the artists that I write about in my book, Folk Art and Aging, started their creative practice or restarted it in retirement. It totally changed it. It became something that they did later. And so there's that aspect of it. Back to the other part of the question is the idea of the darker side. I see this with people who have experienced trauma. The trauma becomes a way, the art becomes a way of dealing with and making speakable the unspeakable. And so there is very dark, and I'm not going to tell them the right way or the wrong way to do these things. I'm there often just listening. I'm not necessarily there to say I can fix them or even to give advice. But just having that empathetic ear to listen to someone tell their story or to show their creative practice, their creative objects to, is a powerful thing. The kind of the power of our work as listeners. I think we've all experienced that, just being a person in the room.
If I can insert a question too, we have another question, but if I could ask, as seeing your pictures and your wonderful examples, we all know that statistically women often live longer, and I wondered if there are gendered aspects of your work that you've noticed or that you want to comment on.
Yes, I don't know that I want to, but I guess I will. The when I wrote the folk art and aging book, one of the issues I saw with it, and I was concerned about it, was I wrote about 4 men and 1 woman. It was unbalanced, and one of the things I started thinking about that, and I think I noticed that men often end up doing the more showier things. Me. They get to retirement and it's like, oh, now I'm going to be this, and I'm going to make these, and I'm going to show people. They draw attention. In general, I hate to stereotype these things, but women tend to be much more communal. That's why the quilting guilds and the groups and the dancing groups, and it's less about me and more about us. And I think also women have usually had some type of practice throughout their life, even if it's even in more domestic circles, that they've had to practice, that many of the people, at least of the generations that I was working with when I wrote this work, a lot of that has changed, I'm sure. So I think that it's gendered that way. Having said that, I think that the men who do it successfully they're easier to spot, but I think there's probably a lot more men out there that are struggling, which may be part of the reason that there's a mortality gap between women and men, that men don't have the support structures that women do, at least of the generation that we've been talking about or looking at most closely.
We have a question from Kate Horrigan, who says, I love how you talk about resilience as not just an individual quality like grit, but rather as something that includes social networks and supports. Many of your programs are geared towards building those networks in fabulous ways. What other kinds of supports for older adults' resilience do you see that folklorists can provide and or advocate for?
Well, I'm sure that there's lots of there are lots of them. I know that just simple things like I live in a rural county here in Indiana. In fact, it's what's called a NORC, a naturally occurring retirement community. The gerontologists have come up with this name for it. And the average age in the county where I live is 10 years older than the state average, the median age. Anyway, there's not a senior center there. There's not a place where older adults can get together in those type of social ways. So it ends up happening in commercial establishments, at local diners or the McDonald's or that type of thing. That's where those are the new senior centers and stuff. But I think we as folklorists, much in the same way that some public folklorists have gone into doing before and after school programs and that type of thing, I think folklorists could be really supportive in helping communities build out those social networks so that older adults, aren't just sitting in their apartments watching endless television or playing Candy Crush on their phones. It fills the time, but it's not filling the soul.
Yeah, and that relates to another question we had earlier about whether you had advice for making sure and you may have just answered this, but for making sure older adults don't get left behind in community programs. Because what you just talked about was really about lack of programs. So
right, lack of programs. I think going back to two of the points I made in the talk, I think we need a lot more programs, and I think we need peer-to-peer programs. That is, programs that are very much older adults with older adults doing things together. But I think even more, we need those opportunities for generativity, where we're getting older adults getting to be elders in their community, getting to show mastery. So we're not just programming at them, but we're programming with them, and we're bringing them into schools, or we're bringing them into community life as experienced whole people, as the master community members that we need them to be. Modernity has totally robbed older adults of that type of function, especially with our love fest of technology. We're leaving a lot of people behind. I think as we build things out, we hopefully can find ways of alleviating that. I'm getting ready to do my first in April. I'm doing my first Zoom version of our folk art summits, where we bring people together to share things. It's with an African American community up in Indianapolis. So I'm excited. I hear that cell phone use is okay in this group, and they can do Zoom. So we're going to give it a try.
That was one of the things I was curious about, and I'm sure others are wondering about as well, is the last year obviously has changed everything.
Oh yeah.
And so in terms of delivery of your programs, but also do you know much about those that you've worked with in the past and how they're doing in COVID?
Yeah, I've been talking on the phone with a lot of the people who have been featured in the Memory, Art, and Aging Guide, and they're many of them have family close by, and so that's helpful to them. The people that we did the memory shelves program with, and then I did a class where I showed movies, and I'd bring people to the older adults to campus, and they'd sit alongside the students, and they'd watch movies together about aging, and then they'd have a conversation afterwards. Those are the people I feel sorry for, the people that maybe don't have extended family and aren't getting those types of programs. And in those types of apartments, the type of services are uneven. Some places do an incredible job. The place I'm talking about does an incredible job, but I know some places, the people are just isolated and alone, and that's really scary.
That is scary. We have a question. If I'm interested in beginning a Folklife and older adults program in my own community, where would be a good place to start? Your resource guide?
My resource guide would be a great, as far as if you're looking for something to be an inspiring thing, that could give you an idea. But I always have the caveat: when we created the Memory, Art, and Aging Guide, it was specifically made for a region of Southern Indiana, and so it's very much tied into that place and things that we saw there. While there's a lot of kind of universal things I think you can take away. I really recommend maybe working with Brent and Joel and them to talk about what a folk life and aging thing would work. You can always email me. I'd love to talk about ideas. Finding a community center, I would imagine your state arts council would probably have some support for something like that. Humanities Council as well. I'm happy to brainstorm with anybody that wants to shoot me an email.
So perhaps we have a fitting, perhaps last question from Bob Gates, who asks, in regard to your own aging, do you find pleasure and resilience in your ability to play Led Zeppelin on your dulcimer?
Yeah. I have to say I've enjoyed a little bit of generativity. My son has turned into an awesome player. And so I very much am enjoying that. I have to say, I started thinking very much about this idea of resilience a lot. About 4 years ago, I started losing my hearing in my left ear. And so a lot of the things about singing and playing have become a lot more difficult for me. And so I come back to that thing of adaptability and the idea of, you know, I still enjoy playing music and getting together with my friends to do it. I don't do it as much as I should. But I also am mindful of the fact that maybe I need to do that same type of investing in my own creative practices so that I don't have just one thing that I can do. I mean, doing the Folklife Festival with Bob all those years ago, Bob, one of the things we noticed is we had like 10 people that were demonstrating doing 100 different things. You know, they were decoy makers, hunters, cooks. That we used them in a whole multitude of ways, and I think it's the same way. It's my creative practice. It won't just be dulcimer, I hope, although I hope I'm still able to do that.
Well, fabulous. Thank you, Jon, so much. As you mentioned when you started, you will be giving another talk for us on April 8th. So if everyone would watch the WKU Folk Studies social media for a talk as part of the Potter College of Arts and Letters alumni series that will be coming up, as I said, on April 8th. So that's exciting. We look forward to seeing some other aspects of this fabulous work in that talk. And again, I'm sure that Joel and Ellie can help spread links to your work and accessing your work. Great. So thank you very much, Jon. And I know everyone is clapping. They just can't show it because of the way this webinar format is set up. A reminder to everybody that we start again day 2 of the gathering tomorrow at 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern, with a featured speaker Ray Geringer of Country Queers, with documenting rural queer histories and another day of fabulous talks. Joel or Ellie, is there anything you want to say as we end here?
I just want to thank everybody who came to any of the sessions and panels and talks today. Thanks for showing up, and I hope you all got something out of it. I know I did, and Ann already gave you a nice reminder that we have a whole nother day of this tomorrow, starting with Ray again at 9:30. So get some rest, get some dinner, and enjoy your Friday night. Hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jon.
Good seeing you all. Yeah. Take care.